Hi, how are we? And sorry about the lighting, man. I had to switch places because my laptop went out of battery and the plug got it's not working. But this video is going to be it's not going to be about work. So there's a person that I actually like. So I go to a place and I work. It's a random place. 1 second. Should pause this so my. All right, this is weirdly better. So just like these conversations that I'm having right now with you guys, I tend to push my luck with people. I tend to talk about random things, random thoughts, random ideas, random concepts, and mostly like I developed a habit of asking questions. So there's a person I go to work and I leased like one of those desks, co-working spaces kind of thing. And I go there on a daily basis. It's part of my routine, and I code in the morning and I do all the things that I do. I read, I take notes, I write for the stuff that I will be doing later on in the day, and all that good stuff. And I plan as well. Like I structure the things that need to be done and how they're going to be done. Again, this is all just because I realized like once you actually commit to certain amounts of time, when that time arrives, you kind of have like everything around you kind of like empties out, and that time is all that makes sense because you kind of like committed to it beforehand, and it's a beautiful thing the mind does. So one of the things that I was actually targeting was meeting interesting people. And I think everyone's interesting, but the problem is sometimes you kind of have to scratch the surface a bit for them to really reveal who they truly are. That's a conversation for later. But so this woman kind of like got me thinking. I think I'll do two videos on this because what's really interesting about her is everything she's been doing is contributing to this kind of like, like when a volcano is about to erupt and kind of all the energy, all the lava is kind of like building up, but the earth still is not cracking. So slowly, it kind of like swells and eventually it kind of like bursts out and like reveals itself to the world and all that stuff. So she's very interesting in what she does and how she kind of like created her space in the market and how she's basically following like she's going around the world visiting events and trying her best to kind of like be better at what she does. But there's one thing that's not happening, which is her actually kind of like allowing the next step to happen. So normally we think about taking the next step. I'm not a believer of that because I think everything you do is basically a step towards something. But it also makes more sense that everything you do is a step away from something. So ultimately, all you have to do is just like keep walking, but then you kind of like have to allow something to happen in your life because you're always walking. It becomes a better decision making process for you to kind of say, like, hey, this will slow me down versus should I do this or not because I'm standing still. And I think that's the whole like kind of do it mentality that everyone kind of like rushes into, and how like the entire world is like don't think about it, just do it, and they don't really explain it, right? There's no like no, I wasn't able to create a mental approach towards it because I was like, just do it. Okay, so what should I do? How will I do it? And all these things kind of like keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. But the easier thing for me to do was like if I was a CEO, what would a CEO do? Probably wake up in the morning and you probably go to work and they'll probably come back to work around 5 o'clock, right? So I had to kind of like pocket that time into work. And then a CEO probably knows a lot of other CEOs, so he probably needs to talk to other CEOs to kind of like build a network kind of thing. And then eventually I realized there are a lot of things that they do and it's like structured within the day. And if I were to kind of like level up, I need to kind of like start acting like a CEO would act. So I don't know what they actually do with their time, but what I did was I blocked periods of time of the day for work to be done. And then within those periods of time, it became a lot easier for me to just consider the things, because like I literally was like, I can't do what I normally would do. I can't like watch anime. I can't read manga. I can't write unless it's contributing to work. I can't like go and hang out at a coffee shop because that's a break that I should actually be taking if I actually get the luxury of a break, right? So once I started thinking in that pattern, I started kind of like isolating stuff. But to go back to the logic of walking, right? So she's been every single day consistent for a while building herself up. When I met her first, like I actually pointed out there's an aura around her, and there's kind of like a certain vibe that how she kind of like walks in, the stuff that she does. Like she always seems focused. That's basically what I noticed. Like she's always focused, which is very captivating, right? When you see somebody actually deep in doing something. And I mentioned it basically casually. I was like, I love how focused you always are. And then basically we started in a conversation, and that kind of like triggered some interest in the conversation from her side. And we ended up kind of like diving deeper into like a concept of life. And then she was like, huh. And then the next time we talked, she asked me a few questions about myself. I responded. And then we talked again, and giving me the way I actually ask questions, because I kind of like, I don't like open loops. I realized most of my life before I started kind of like reflecting on it, or at least observing it, was filled with open loops. It's like a whole lot of stuff that are not closed, starting with conversations, like conversations that I had. Fuck, man, it's like memories of conversations that I had with people that never actually ended started coming to me. And it's not that I remember the conversation itself, because the conversation never ended, it repeated itself multiple times throughout my life. Because every single time you know enough about something to actually start something, a conversation, you start having it, and then basically at one point you stop. And when you stop, you kind of like look at yourself and you go like, okay, and then you change the subject. And then the next time you want to talk to people, what are you going to talk about? Probably something that's already in your head and not completed, because your mind kind of keeps it. It goes like, uh-huh, we never finished this. But then I started realizing that and noticing that. So finishing conversations is not really a thing among mere mortals. Just the random people around us kind of like pick up a habit of just having like shallow conversations that are like, how are you today? Good. Oh, have you seen what's happening in the weather? What's politics? This and that. They shouldn't. But nothing really substantially like that allows it to kind of like not no longer become a thing in your head. And so the more we talked, and it became an occasional thing. Like anytime she comes to work normally, like if she's having her coffee and I'm having a cigarette, I see her, she says hi, and she talks to me a bit. It became a bit more engaging to a point where, like, most of the time, she uses words that I didn't like, and her whole, and that's the perfect way to explain it. Like her whole explanation of her situation slash life, and it was never a situation for her. For her, it was just like, oh, I would love to do that, but I feel like I'm stuck in my comfort zone. So I'd ask some questions. But the whole way she perceived her own like reality, and reality is the big word here, the whole way she perceived her own reality was kind of like structured in a very awkward way, is in a very noobish way, I would call it. Very, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do in my life way, right? But then if you look at her track record, it was like beyond, I would say beyond reproach. It's a beautiful word, beyond reproach. Because she literally, on a daily basis, does her due diligence towards her work, towards her family, towards her future, towards her friends. She does the work that needs to be done every single day, but she looks at it in a very weird, I'm still 21 kind of way. And I'm not saying she's not mature, but it was interesting for me. Why? Because like she's always kind of like excited to talk to me and to see where I would take the conversation, because she was never able to kind of like see it from a different angle. And because of that, I started realizing that that maybe people get stuck in these things, and maybe people kind of get stuck in explaining to themselves their successes, right? Like emotional trauma, when your mom keeps yelling at you, you're not doing enough. Then eventually you look at yourself and you go like, no, even if I'm actually successful, I'm gonna feel like it's not enough. And all of these like kind of things are intertwined with our emotions and feelings and our personalities and our characteristics, and eventually represent themselves in our character, in our mind, in our existence on this earth. So a big part of our conversations became literally like her kind of me asking a question. She explains her opinion. I ask her a few questions about her opinion. And then gradually she starts basically trying to explain. And then I go like, no, but that's not what you said earlier. And then she goes like, you're right. I explained it this way, but it didn't make sense anymore, right? Like, you know, when you're actually having a conversation that's kind of like fixing itself because you're not really sending the message. And almost every time we do that, something clicks in my head, like about words that she used. And what I started doing was writing about them. And I have a blog that is that I write stuff in. And normally I kind of like write stuff on a piece of paper and I discuss them with myself. But for some reason, I felt like she needed to properly read in details how her use of the words kind of like affects how she thinks and how she looks at life. And I don't know, I don't think I did this for her. I think I did this because I was inspired by her, because like she's literally one of those badass people that's kind of stuck, and it didn't make sense to me. Because Anna, for me, like if you're badass, you're not stuck. You're moving, and it's just like the sense of direction. But she's actually like kind of stuck in her head. So I started writing, and today basically I kind of like started thinking, why not discuss what I'm writing online? Or maybe I could actually start discussing these kind of like triggering words that get stuck with me. If I discuss them like this, then when I write them, I would have already gotten the first conversation out about it. The first me trying to explain them out. And I think this is what I want to do with this video, just explaining how I'm actually processing the next set of videos that are more philosophical. And I'm going to basically like I changed the format of the title, so I'll probably kind of still engage with the format that I have until it doesn't make sense anymore. But I'm glad I changed it because now I can actually say like meeting interesting people, for example, as actually part of the the subtitles. So I'm excited, and I think meeting interesting people would be the title of this of this video. Okay, man, this is super weird.